I'm going to start accepting the people in the waiting room now. And on the hour, Chelsea, feel free to start.
Hello and welcome to this special session, Youth Leadership in Water, Putting Words into Action. My name is Chelsea Hayward and I'll be your host for this session today. I'm a young water professional based in Sydney, Australia, and I'm part of the International Water Association YWP Steering Committee. So this session is led by the International Water Association in celebration of International Youth Day, which is tomorrow on the 12th of August. And this year's theme is intergenerational solidarity, creating a world for all ages. So I hope you have all had the opportunity to attend some of the other forum sessions over the last couple of days. There have certainly been some interesting and thought-provoking topics covered, from strengthening water security in Asia and the Pacific to new methods used as support to holistic and integrated decision-making, to tackling the ambitious goal of universal water access, as well as smart utilities, circular economy, and many, many more. So it can be easy to join these types of forums, listen into a few sessions, take note of some interesting points, and then return to your day-to-day role without putting much of those learnings into action. However, in line with International Youth Day objective this year to amplify the message that action is needed across all generations to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and leave no one behind, we encourage you to take the time to reflect on what you have learned over the past few days. Think about what role you play in the water sector and about what actions you can take to make that a reality. So the main objective of this session is to generate actionable insights to develop the leadership skills of youth in order to take on leadership roles within the water sector. So this session will draw from key messages and calls to actions from the forum, in particular to discuss how youth can contribute to the key focus areas of water as a sustainable resource, universal water and sanitation services, productive water in agriculture and the economy, and climate change and water-related risks. So this will be an interactive session where you'll have an opportunity to collaborate with each other to arrive at your personal commitments on leadership development. So I hope you're all ready to engage and be part of some really interesting and thought-provoking discussions in this session today. So to get you started on thinking about the leadership role that you may play in the water sector, we are very lucky to be joined by Dr. Andre Taylor today. Andre's personal mission is to help leaders fulfill their potential and enable positive change through leadership development, team development, and facilitation work. So Andre is a leadership development specialist, sustainability and water practitioner, educator, coach, and facilitator. And Andre will be sharing his insights into the key leadership skills for young water professionals to actively contribute to the water sector. So I will hand over to Andre now to share his insights with everyone today.
Thanks very much, Chelsea. I'll just share my screen and then I'll get going. I can relax once the screen's working. Hopefully you can see that okay. Tell me if you can't.
Yeah, you're good to go.
All good. So thanks for that kind introduction and welcome everyone. Great to be with you and really nice to be joining a group of professionals with an interest in leadership development, especially focusing on how we can build the capacity of younger water leaders. What I wanted to do today was, firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge the people that have been working hard putting this forum together this week and also this session. It does require leadership, so it's relevant to this session today, but I just want to acknowledge all that hard work and leadership. Also want to acknowledge people that are tuning in and joining us today. I'm a big believer that we need greater leadership capacity in the water sector to address the complex challenges that currently face us and will face us in the future. So the more we can do in this space, the more people interested in this topic, the better. We've got lots of work to do, but we're also doing some great things and we can build off that. Today, as Chelsea mentioned, I've been asked to give a short presentation, only 10 minutes, to get us thinking, or hopefully provide some food for thought and action around what can we do to help younger water leaders or younger professionals that might move into the water sector to build their leadership capacity, especially leadership skills, and enable them to be at their best so that they can influence and drive positive change. So that's the brief today. And I thought the best way I could do that is to share with you just 5 concepts that I think are really important in this space. These 5 concepts, I think, are important to communicate to younger leaders when they're just starting their leadership development adventure. And I use that word adventure deliberately because it is an adventure. But these concepts are also important, I think, when people like me and my colleagues who are a little older, perhaps, are planning, designing, and building various leadership development interventions for younger leaders. And so these concepts are guidelines, if you like, that I think are really important to embrace. You might notice that I'm being a little cheeky as a provocateur, and I'm going to be talking about leadership capacity more broadly. I'm not just focusing just on skills. So I hope you don't mind me taking that scope. All right, so let's get going. We don't have much time, so let's get going. The first concept I wanted to touch on is the importance of shifting mindset. So before we get to skills, I would always start with mindset. And I think particularly working with people who are just starting their leadership development journey, which includes obviously younger water leaders, helping them to understand that leadership is not a position, it's a process of influence, can be really transformational. So at the International Water Centre, where I work in Australia, we adopt the Centre for Creative Leadership definition of leadership, the DAC definition, that describes leadership as a social process of influence, not a position, that delivers 3 outcomes: direction, alignment of activities and resources towards that direction, and joint commitment to collective success. And if we embrace that definition and understand it, and it might take a while, we might have to wrestle with it, it can be very liberating and empowering, because it means that we can start to engage in leadership straight away, irrespective of what organizational position we hold. And we might look to people like the Greta Thunbergs of this world, who have been engaging in powerful leadership since she was at school and didn't hold any formal position. So this is a very powerful mindset shift for some people. And why is it important? It leads to a leader identity. People like Professor David Day, a leading authority and thought leader around leadership development, has written about this extensively. He argues that the first step in leadership development that we need to get to is developing a leader identity, so that we see ourselves as an emerging, developing leader, and we start to voluntarily engage in leadership development activities. We might get a mentor, we might do a course, we might volunteer to lead a leadership project. So that's the first goal, is to get that leader identity, and shifting our mindset and understanding what leadership is. It's a process, not a position, is key. So I would always start here before I start moving on to skills. So hopefully you understand the logic here. The second concept I wanted to share with you is just understanding that there are many different leadership roles that we can play in the water sector. You know, if you think about it, there's, you know, emergent leadership roles like a champion roles, there's boundary spanning leadership roles, team leader roles, executive organizational leader roles, political leader roles, adaptive leader roles. They're creating spaces for experimentation. Each of these roles requires certain abilities, including skills. So the skill set you might need to play a champion role, like a Greta Thunberg, is slightly different to a skill set you'd need to play, say, an executive leadership role or a political leadership role. So start helping younger leaders to think about what leadership roles they want to play is very valuable, because it really starts to focus. It takes a very big topic and makes it much more tangible and digestible. So for an emerging leader like a Greta Thunberg, who's at least started her leadership playing that champion role, you know, an initiator, a change agent role, if you focus on playing that role, then, you know, there's certain abilities that are needed to play that role. For example, using the transformational leadership style, very strong communication skills, a propensity to take risks. These skill sets, these abilities are needed to play that role, and we can start to focus on learning to play that role and building those capabilities. It becomes much more practical. The third concept I wanted to share with you is understanding that leadership capacity is quite a broad term. It includes skills, but it's not limited to skills. So when we're thinking about helping younger leaders to build capacity and really be at their best so that they can drive positive change in the water sector, I would encourage everyone just to step back a little bit and say, okay, skills are important, but it's not just skills. So we need to understand that leadership as a social process of influence includes three important ingredients. You know, the role of leaders, and we focus on that a lot, perhaps too much. But there's also the role of the followers. Followership is very important. It's been underrated in my view for many, many years, especially in the West. And then the context can make a huge difference in terms of whether leaders will emerge and how effective they can be. So the capacity of leaders matters, but also the capacity of followership and context matters. We mustn't forget those three ingredients. And then if we just focus on leaders, and we're doing that today, you know, there's abilities that are needed there around mindset, which are incredibly powerful. So for me, that's where transformative change can really occur in the leadership development context. Mindset shifts, sometimes known as vertical leadership development. Self-leadership skill sets and abilities. You know, is confidence a skill or an ability? We need forms of power. You know, it's impossible to engage in influence without forms of power, and there's many different forms of power, you know, personal as well as positional. So leaders need to understand that and be able to build different forms of power in order to exert influence. They need to have skills in, you know, communication and influence, obviously, but they also need to have networks that deliver, social networks, relationships that deliver certain benefits. So there's a lot of things that need to be in place for an effective, for a leader to be effective, including skills. If we just work on skill development alone, we're going to be disappointed. For example, we could go off and do a lot of work on polishing our influence skills and be really good at designing influence strategies. But if we've got no basis of power, such as power from credibility, institutional knowledge, relationships, etc., if we've got no power, we are not going to be able to exert influence. So we need the combination of forms of power with the skill to design and execute an influence strategy. The fourth concept I wanted to share with you is that the process should start as early as possible and never stop. I think we're getting much better here. Leadership development used to be something that, you know, executives went off and did later in their career. It's not that way anymore, thankfully. It's sometimes called the great southerly migration of leadership in hierarchical organizations, that leadership starts reasonably early in traditional water organizations, but it can start a lot earlier. Of course, it can start at school, it can start at university and in various parts of the community. So my view is it should start as early as possible and never stop. My mindset is to try to help people that I work with to become lifelong students of leadership and to build the ability to manage their own developmental process. So understanding, for example, the 70-20-10 rule of leadership, you've probably heard about that, leadership development, that says most development happens by doing. Maybe 70% of growth happens through conscious practice of new approaches, 10% from structured learning, such as training and education, and 20% from feedback and support. And we need to add reflection to that mix as well. So we need to have the four basic food groups of leadership development operating: conscious practices of new approaches, feedback as we go, support from more experienced leaders, and we need to be reflecting on what we're learning. So we need to make sure those four ingredients are operating at all times. And the last concept I wanted to share with you, and hopefully this will prompt some thinking, is where do we start? There's so many leadership competencies, and even if we're just focusing on learning how to play one leadership role, like a team leader role, say, there's still a lot of things we could work on. So where do we start? Where should younger leaders invest their time and energy? I would argue to focus on what I call the big five. For me, these are core leadership competencies that are needed really in any leadership role. And the sooner we start working on these, the better. So mindset, I've already talked about that. Leader identity, understanding what leadership really is. Self-leadership abilities, including skills, emotional intelligence, things like self-awareness, empathy, self-regulation, knowing your purpose and values, resilience, time management. The ability to build different forms of power and designing and executing an influence strategy is central to what leadership's all about. There's a bunch of communication skills needed as well: listening, presenting, storytelling, and the ability to strategically and consciously build and maintain different types of social networks to deliver certain benefits. For me, I just don't think it's possible to be an effective leader without having high levels of ability, including skill, across those five areas. So I'd encourage water leaders to start there. and never stop. We can always improve in these areas. So my time is almost up. So I just wanted to make the points that we've got a lot of work to do, a big challenge ahead of us. We need greater leadership capacity in the water sector. And I'm not talking about just people in senior leadership positions. I'm talking about people right through our community of practice. So the sooner we can get cracking on leadership development and build broad leadership capacity, the better. It should start as early as possible, and it should never really end. We should be encouraging younger leaders to become lifelong students of leadership. And the 5 concepts I've very briefly talked through today, I think are useful to communicate to younger leaders as they start their leadership development adventure, but also they're 5 concepts we can use to plan, design, and construct leadership development interventions, courses, programs, workshops, whatever that may be for our younger leaders. And I might leave it there. Chelsea, do I hand back to you?
Yes, thank you very much, Andre, for that. I really like that concept around lifelong learning, certainly something that I try and take on board throughout my career so far. So yes, thank you very much again for sharing those really great insights, Andre. So now, before we head off into our discussions, we want to remind you about the key focus areas that we will be addressing today. So we do have our wonderful rapporteurs here who will provide a bit of a summary of the key calls to action from each of our 4 focus areas. So first up, if I can please get Isabella to share what you've been taking note on.
Thank you, Chelsea. So the focus area 1 discussed topics related to decision support for efficient water utilization, the importance of finance, how we can promote private sector participation and other stakeholder engagement in the water sector. It also discussed governance and planning for water security, innovative technologies for optimization and resilience. And today we had a discussion about nature-based solutions and integrative perspectives. All the topics highlighted that water plays a vital role in our society, and it will keep shaping the interactions, not only among human beings, but with the nature, with the environment itself. And one of the things that I really like it is that the discussions demonstrated that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for the problems and the challenges that the water sector is facing, that our society is facing. However, it is important to keep sharing these different experiences and knowledge from different contexts, so from the global north, from the global south, in order to learn from them. And I believe that the Asia Water Forum is a perfect example of these spaces where we can promote this knowledge sharing. And among the examples that were shared, I have to highlight it, that they mentioned nature-based solutions, integrated urban water modeling, water resources ecological footprint model, and the water, energy, and food and ecosystem nexus. And another important thing is that it was highlighted that water governance and management also depends on better partnerships, engaging all relevant stakeholders to mobilize, finance, and sustain efforts to ensure water security and resilience. And finally, it was highlighted that youth will play a great role in water management and governance, and that we should promote them and engage them as much as possible. So, Chelsea, back to you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. I'm glad to hear that that youth did come up in those discussions as well. Next, I will hand over to Huiji to give us a summary.
Hello, everyone. I attended the 2A to 2E sessions during the 3 days. The 5 sessions are all about they covered many topics. For example, they have this WASH towards universal access of water, innovative tools, data-driven smart utilities, universal sanitation by financing tools, and the sector capacity and stakeholder engagement. So there are a lot of inspiring discussions and presentations. I learned especially a lot from this technology and data-driven aspects of the water sector. And I think some key messages or suggestions include, for example, to enhance the capacity, exchange skills, and the knowledge of the practitioners to accommodate gender equity and social inclusion in the WASH initiatives. And for example, they also mentioned to foster the communication engagement of all parties in planning, design, and the delivery of water-related projects. In terms of data-driven smart utilities, they emphasized to send data to community to make sure that these data are usable and understandable to more people so that they can tackle sustainable challenges involving different sectors of the water utilities. So I find, because I'm from the technology or science perspective, so I think these presentations are at the state-of-the-art technologies, and really we look forward for these technologies to be applied in the real world. Thank you. Go back to Chelsea.
Thank you very much for that great summary. We'll now go over to Niti.
Thanks, Chelsea. Hello, everyone. In times of rising food demand and changing climate, the focus area 3, productive water in agriculture and economy discussions led to some best case scenarios for water productivity in agriculture and economy. I will quickly go through a few areas we identified that require attention going forward. Involvement and engagement of broad range of stakeholders was identified as one of the core elements of any successful project implementation. For example, case studies discussed how involving farmers and local communities in design and plan of action help promote ownership and maintenance of these technologies. Same would be true for policymakers. There still exist various challenges in water productivity, especially in the developing countries, as the term water productivity remains least understood, rather misunderstood, and it finds low priority in the policy hierarchy. Besides water productivity, the need to work on commodities, nutrient management, improving process efficiencies, improving cultivars, and efficient use of resources, including irrigation systems, could be enlisted as areas requiring action. The water energy nexus identified the importance of cross-sectoral opportunities in urban resource mining. The case studies under this topic also highlighted the need of knowledge sharing. Moreover, examples of high male labor migration and feminization of agricultural labor expose the unequal social and gender relations that further impact the adoption of these technologies. The need to address the gender gap and ensure social inclusion for adoption of climate smart technologies was also highlighted. The need to base future policies on principles of circular economy and water reuse was discussed, and this would require multi-stakeholder groups for multi-circularity as well as achieving carbon neutrality. There is also a need for development of culture, meaning awareness and education is required for promoting the safe reuse of wastewater in all sectors, including renewable energy, agriculture, and climate. Decisions on finances and private sector participation identified the need for innovative strategies that help achieve higher gross margins for farmers. Discussion on finances and private sector participation identified the need for innovative strategies that help achieve higher gross margins for farmers. There is a need to strengthen investment in irrigation systems by understanding the infrastructures, service needs of the emerging farmers, and the farmer technologies they have been using. Further, it is necessary to implement investments that support farmers mitigate emissions through irrigation systems that run on renewable energy. To sum it up, importance of interdisciplinary but collective action, need to address technical challenges in water productivity and making data available, as well as its integration into policies and decision-making, emerged as the key areas sitting at the triangulation of water productivity, smart agriculture, and circular economy, with studies that range from island communities to farmers in the drought-prone districts. We've discussed a wide range of solutions, as well as these definitive ideas have been identified that call for action today. Over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you very much, Niti, for that wonderful summary. And finally, I will pass over to Rihanna.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. And I will be speaking on some key messages that came out of the session on climate and water-related risk. So a lot of emphasis was made on the multi-layered characteristics of climate and water-related risks and the importance to look beyond traditional indicators while combining different study methods and resilience measures to help better understand and adapt to negative consequences, in particular those that impact on human livelihoods. Attention was brought to the greater visibility to the connection between climate change and urban sanitation in climate and policy dialogues and mechanisms, and calling for the greater intersectoral coordination across sanitation and urban resilience. We were left with a question among our audience: how can synergies and trade-offs in addressing mitigation and adaptation be optimized? Further discussions predominantly revolved around various methods of measuring risk in the gaps shaping technical results and using it as an enabler for action. It was communicated that water risks tend to be abstract and conceptual, so instead of using technical terms and assessment findings, using impact language and stories were proven to be more effective to communicate risk and attract funding. Further on, the sessions acknowledged the inherently complex nature of governance, with many stakeholders at various levels involved, often pulling in different directions and priorities. There needs to be a better institutional coordination and dialogue between the various bottom-up and top-down approaches to governance to develop national and subnational strategies in a more robust way that incorporates different perspectives and cultures to pave the way for clear, actionable objectives and strategies. It was also highlighted that communication is key between institutional actors and relevant stakeholders. Fragmentation and inconsistent coordination in national and international governance can result in confusing and conflicting information. And this brought up a conversation between the differences between over and under governed communities. A key point that was made was that water scarcity and security is not only a technical problem, but also a social and political problem. Overall, in the session that's focused on governance, they call for governance to be given the same priority and importance as with infrastructure when it comes to allocation of funding, time, and resources. Our final session that we had, even though there was one earlier today, we have on green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. And this session focused on how to understand and leverage nature-based solutions for climate resilience. There were many examples on how nature-based solutions can be a success in building climate resilience. However, there were a lot of arguments as well on the commercial feasibility of these solutions and how to make them more attractive to funders. Discussions touched on the need for relevant long-term data to support the viability and the need for better policies to incentivize investments in this area. And there was also a call to action on knowledge and capacity building on nature-based solutions to be made available to farmers and locals.
Thank you very much, Rihanna, and thank you again to all our wonderful rapporteurs. So hopefully that's given everyone a good summary and overview of the various technical sessions that have happened over the last couple of days, and which will now, I guess, use to have a think about what action youth can take to contribute to these focus areas, the broader water sector. So now it is over to you, but before we head into our breakout discussions, we'll just give you a quick rundown of the tool that we'll be using to guide these discussions. So we have set up a Miro board for the breakout sessions, which Yang is sharing now. So each each of the breakouts will have a particular area of the board to focus on. So for example, those who are in the breakout for focus area 1 will head over to this section of the board. And as discussions start happening, we encourage you to use the stickies. So we have already set up stickies beside each of the areas. So it's as simple as clicking on that sticky, dragging it across, and then typing into it. So thank you, Yang, for demonstrating. It's all pretty simple. There's plenty of stickies there. If you feel like you start to run out, you can easily just Control-C, Control-V, copy-paste for more stickies if needed. So we will have some breakout room facilitators in each of the breakouts, Louisa, Maria, Misael, and Edward, but I'll let them introduce themselves once they're in their rooms. So yeah, that is it from me. Your facilitator will explain the activity to you once you're in the rooms, but hope you have some really great discussions and come up with some actionable items to start having a think about how you can play more of a leadership role in the water sector. Looks like people are starting to return. We'll give everyone another minute or so to get back into the main session. Alrighty, I hope everyone had some really great discussions in that session, and we're able to come up with some really tangible actions to take forward in the short term and potentially the longer term as well. So I'd love to hear about what was going on in each of the breakout rooms. So we'll start with the group who were discussing focus area 1, water as a sustainable resource. So Louisa, did you have a volunteer from your breakout room to share back?
Sadly, there was people trying to volunteer, but they were experiencing technological barriers. But I would like to share with you that in the group, a lot of things have came out from the question number 1, response of the tangible actions. They have expressed, for example, engaging water sector, joining water youth-led groups, volunteering as an important tangible action that they can do, actively participating in different activities regarding water conservation, for example, no waiting for others to do the job, take the initiative to do that. Highlight several leadership capacities as well. So regarding question number 2 about what motivates and what drives them is like make a difference in the world, right? We know that something is not working, so we want to work and try to change that. Dedicated and passionate peers, colleagues, that motivates them as well. The barriers or the challenges, the financing barriers always appear as a challenge to overcome the limited resources. Maybe there is not enough network to work with. And how can they be supported? Opening spaces for that dialogue, for mentorship, for guidance, conference and training was named as well. Provide easy access to well-designed courses. So it's all related to that. So it's all what I cannot recall from my first group. So if anyone from my first group would like to add something, feel free to do it now. Otherwise, they were interested in having the sticky notes for later. So it will be nice if we can share to them as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louisa, for sharing. Next up, focus area 2, universal water and sanitation services. Maria, did you want to share back from that group?
Yes, we also had some participants with technological barriers, but I think we were able to get some good discussion going still. So in terms of tangible actions, people were talking about looking into getting training on WASH with really specifically called out Red R. They want to look at advocacy and how to share knowledge and exchange knowledge. They want to seek out potential mentor relationships in the sector and build their networks, and also use more technology to have to ensure more stakeholders and all stakeholders can be involved in decision making. There was also feedback on water is nature's gift to us, and then we should really be using our power to kind of improve and work with stakeholder relationships. In terms of what drives and motivates our group to participate, we're talking, a lot of people were talking about giving back to the community, protecting our water resources, ensuring equal access to basic infrastructure. They wanted to make a difference. They wanted to connect with like-minded people in the sector, learn more from youth leaders and peers, engage more in the water management sector, and seeing their job not merely as a job, but like a passion to serve community, and kind of wanting to be part of that decision-making process. In terms of barriers, being heard, technology is a barrier, lack of support in their own organization, lack of confidence, and lack of access to knowledge sharing from upper levels of organizations. So we talked about how we can be better supported in addressing those barriers, and that looked at guidance, mentoring, allowing time for professional leadership development, investment in our career development plans, and ensuring that youth are empowered to speak, and valuing the diverse thoughts of young leaders. Group 2, if you had anything to add, please feel free.
I was in group 2, and I think that was a great summary. Thanks, Maria. I'll now hand over to Misael, who was in focus area 3, productive water in agriculture and the economy. Did you get a volunteer, or will you be sharing yourself?
I think Jeffrey McAllister will be sharing for our group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as mentioned, we looked at productive water in agriculture and economy. For the answer for question 1, how can youth respond to each of these calls to action? It was interesting, there's a lot of focus on communication, which being one of those leadership qualities that was presented to us earlier, but with the main aims of 1, learning, which I think is something that most young people are doing during kind of the first, well, continuous learning is important, but I think there's a real strong emphasis on most people's first decade of their career. Networking as well, with the understanding the economy is vast and complex, and there are lots of different stakeholders with different motivators, and getting a deep understanding of that can help lead to win-win solutions. On the flip side of that listening is also the sharing side, sharing knowledge and data with less aware classes of society, having empathy. And then finally, in water scarce regions, there's a particular emphasis on being smart and innovative. So upskilling, learning new techniques, and working to, I guess, steward and implement that technology. On question 2, what drives and motivates you to participate? Once again, there's a big focus on, I guess, water being just crucial to so many aspects of life, both human life, but also our ecosystems. And as we begin to see less and less water available, or more and more water degradation, there's a complex and challenging problem. And by getting involved, we not only stand a chance to find solutions to this problem, but working together through networks like YWPs, we support each other, we challenge each other, we push each other, and that sort of collaboration as units can be crucial to tackling a big and complex problem. Another interesting takeaway was someone wrote, there's a one-to-one expert to youth ratio, youth to experts, and it's really important that kind of we reach out as we are going to be the legacy. So make sure knowledge is transferred down, but then viewed through our unique lenses to, I guess, scale and be the next generation that are bigger and better than the one that came before. Finally, question 3, barriers and challenges we've encountered. There seem to be quite a lot on traditional sectors, engineering being the one I'm from, valuing experience above all else. And whereas I think experience is incredibly important, years experience isn't always the best way of measuring that. Moreover, as these problems become more complex, we need people from different diverse backgrounds. And as a result, and we need to make, I guess, them moving into the space, their voices heard, accepted, etc. And that lack of inclusivity isn't just age. There's lack of inclusivity around gender, around other underrepresented aspects, so that those lessons can probably scale throughout. Finally, how can the wider sector senior professionals support younger lessons? Listen, first and foremost, make opportunities. Things like emerging voices panels, shadow executives are great opportunities to get young voices alongside senior leader voices and having two-way discussions, which can open up more both opportunities for young professionals to learn and grow, but also you'll likely get some good solutions out of it. Finally, to reconsider traditional career paths. So a lot of careers still have, you spend X years at X role and then you go on to the next role. It's quite linear. That no longer aligns with many people's experiences, aims, or ambitions. So consider non-linear paths, champion people that want to do something a little bit different. And that
thank you very much,
most of the
Jeff.
board, unless someone has anything else they want to add that I missed. Important points.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. And finally, focus area 4, climate change and water related risks. Edward, did you get a volunteer?
We didn't get a volunteer, so I'll be presenting the interesting responses from our group 4 participants. So for the first question on our how can we respond to the climate change and water related risk call to action. So one of the among the suggested answers are better communication strategy, at least to laymanize how we communicate science to the general public. Another is on behavioral change, would focus on valuing nature more. And on top of this, also we also look into building connections, not just among the young water professionals, but also to the decision makers, the policy makers, and the more senior professionals. And looking also or utilizing other strategies for sourcing water, like alternate water sources, and implementing on-the-ground community projects, even on a small scale, to our local communities. And yeah, that's all for the first question. Now for the second, the drivers that motivate us to participate include our personal experiences in our local or in our home countries, particularly the impacts of the climate change and other natural calamities aggravated by climate change. And also the leadership from local and national at the national level, wherein there are some inconsistent commitment and different agenda priorities. And another thing is the positive attitude of our young water professionals here, that they believe that, or they know that they can do better and better over time, and they want others also to realize that they have the higher potential. So optimism can help here solve complex problems. So it's the attitude. And for the third question on the barriers and the challenges that many of us personally encountered, these include not being taken seriously because of our young age, or being also discriminated because of our professional background, gender, and other limited experiences. And there's also the limitation for funding. There's the tokenistic representation. Another form of discrimination is from the geography and the cultural context of our workplaces. And also another a problem encountered is the limited opportunities for young people. And on some personal note, the entry point where they don't know where to start, or they don't know if they can contribute anything. Now, for the last question on the support from the wider sector and the more senior professionals, the popular answers here are mentoring and providing opportunity for us to be capacitated and to progress with our career. And we were also provided with the answer that we can ensure the young water professionals to pursue a career in the water sector, wherein the seniors train the young water professional, not just as a colleague, but also building relationship to become peers. And there's also the intergenerational paving way of relationship building. And from one of our more senior participants, identify high potential youth leaders early on and to keep on supporting them. So engaging the youth by giving them a priority for budget allocation and human resources. So these are the answers that we have collected from our participants here. So if any other answers that I have missed, members of the group 4 can please chime in. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much, Edward. Sounds like there was some really great discussions going on, and definitely picked up on a theme around building connections and things like that. So hopefully we'll start to see lots of young water professional networking events popping up over the next little while. And yeah, just encourage you to go in and have a look at the Miro board and have a look in the other areas and see what the other groups did get up to in their discussions. So you can grab a copy of that Miro link and access the board at any time after the session as well. So I'm going to hand over to Yang now to finish us up with some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. And what is there left to say but thank you, and express how incredibly proud I am for everyone who has joined this session. Just you showing up to this session and this workshop today tells me that youth leadership is alive. And we at the International Water Association, as well as the Asian Development Bank, must do everything to keep nurturing that. I've always said that hashtag the onus is on us. And such is the call to action for young water professionals to strive to become the kind of leaders that the world needs and that the world deserves. But I'd also like to emphasize what all the other speakers have already said, that there's also a call to action to our senior leaders and our mentors. The challenge is not only with the youth, because we've always been ready and willing to lead. Rather, the challenge is also upon our leaders to keep engaging the youth meaningfully. Jeff earlier mentioned that there should be a 1-to-1 ratio of mentor to youth. No, let's make that 1-to-10. I am grateful for those who are paving the way for us for that kind of leadership to happen, that multiplier effect amongst the youth, the likes of Dr. Andre Taylor, whose provocation really got to us this morning. And I'd also like to mention especially Sir Frankie Aureliano, who was in our breakout room. He was one of our inspirations for really setting up the Philippine Young Water Professional. Andre, Frankie, we as the youth are your legacy, and we are honored to pass it on to the next generation as we move along. Again, thank you to everyone who has joined the session, and please tune in to the all youth, all women closing panel that's going to happen in about an hour, as well as our power-packed closing ceremony for the Asia Water Forum. Before I end, I'd like to say happy birthday, Chelsea. Thank you for choosing to celebrate your birthday with us today, and have a great International Day of the Youth, which we are going to celebrate tomorrow. Thank you all for joining this session, and see you in the other AWF finale panels. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy birthday. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Happy
Bye.
birthday, Chelsea.
Bye.